Man, does anybody remember the book, The Stinky Cheese Man? And I had to look up the rest of the title. And Other Fairly Stupid Tales. It was like all these retellings of like, you know, historic fairy tales. The gingerbread man's a little stinky cheese man. And it's a great book. I liked it. I almost want to go buy it again on eBay. Pick it up. Be great for your kids. Change their whole worldview. Nice little piece of satire. Why was I thinking about this? I was thinking about this because I was talking to somebody today, and one of the things I wanted to talk about was just kind of asking for advice and like thinking through things, but was sort of like, why is it that in a lot of cases I feel like we human beings wait for things to get so bad before we make a change? And, even if you have someone who's like, the canary in the coal mine pointing like, hey, this is going wrong. And here's the impending doom, that we kind of, shrug it off, make up a different story, look the other way. And then finally when it all hits the fan, then we're kind of like, it's a really disgusting analogy. But, then we're all sort of like, oh man, we better do something about this. Never saw this coming. And maybe we did see it coming, but we just deep down inside, we wanted to believe it wasn't going to happen, or things really weren't that bad. But it's just an interesting thing. And how this got me to the Stinky Cheese Man book is I was sort of thinking about like, all right, maybe there's just different types of us. Like some of us like to just live with our head in the sand around a lot of things and just hope that nothing ever really goes bad. Others maybe run around and we're like the Chicken Little, and we're like always talking about how like the sky is falling, and even in times when things really aren't that bad and there's a lot in our control we can do to make things better. And then there's probably another group of us who are like insanely optimistic, like the Pollyanna approach. There's nothing wrong, don't need to check in with anything, everything's fine, everything's okay, which also has its downsides. And then those three, the Chicken Little, Sky is Falling, made me think of the Stinky Cheese Man book. That's how I got to that. Then I had to look up the title to share that gem with you. But I was talking to someone about this today, and like, why are we like this? Why do we let this kind of stuff happen? And the response she gave me was really interesting. Kind of after a pause, there was a couple things. I think it was one, sometimes change requires a little bit of pain. It definitely requires some friction. And also on the other side of that is like pain, hardship can be really, really powerful motivators if you stack up enough of it. And then on top of that, there's just this concept that we like to be comfortable. I mean, we are creatures of homeostasis, right? Like we don't like the temperature to be really hot and then all of a sudden really cold and then somewhere in the middle and then really hot again. We don't like that. Our bodies like and work really hard to maintain some level of homeostasis. We don't always do really good. Human beings don't really do great with highs and lows. And that made me think like, man, I wonder if just physiologically, especially when it happens quickly, we're not terribly effective at change. And if you think about other like big systems in our body, like the immune system's freaking amazing, but it doesn't respond necessarily fast. To like slow threats, it's super powerful. I think in some cases, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but I think in order to react like really quickly, I don't know how effective it is. And then if the environment changes again, point being, I think in some ways, like physiologically, we might not be that well adapted to change. I could be wrong here. It's just a theory, just me thinking through this. And also, I think psychologically, change is really challenging. And, this is all over the internet, and we've, all the self-help books and strategy books and whatever. People have talked about this forever. One of my favorite sayings is like, the devil you know is better than the one you don't. And I think in a lot of ways this is true. Like, predictable shittiness, for some reason, seems not as bad as the unpredictable shittiness. And it even seems better than the potential upside of, something that's not necessarily predictable, but could be good. So I think it's really hard for us to have change, and I think it does. In some cases, it takes like a lot to pile on before we have change. That's why you have phrases out there like, it took me to hit rock bottom before I made a change. And I don't think it's always as like, it's like not all these like drastic life circumstances. It could be really, really simple stuff. But one of the things I think makes it even more challenging is if I don't know, was Stanley Milgram the guy? I think he did like the authority leadership experiments. But I forget who did the psychological experiment where, he showed a group of people of like a series of lines. And one line was clearly shorter than the others. But the participant came in the room. Hey, which is the shortest line? Line A. And then they showed the paper to the rest of the room, and the rest of the room said something like, the lines are all the same length or something like that. And the group dynamic of, and basically the person who came in and clearly saw the line was shorter or different sized, slowly started to change their attitude in order to conform with the group. And I think, there's a huge amplification of this resistance to change in a group setting. It makes it even worse. But it's just funny because it's like, I can think of so many scenarios where I've experienced this with groups, other people, and just in the past. And it's like, hey, these things were clearly, we were cruising for a bruising. There were clearly these obstacles in our way. And we kind of just kept kicking the can down the road and ignoring them until they really piled up and exploded. And then we were like, oh yeah, time to make a change. So I wonder a lot about why that is. And maybe more importantly, one of the things I was thinking about on the drive home today was, how do you combat against this? Because you don't always want to wait until things are as bad as possible before you make a change. And something else I thought about was like, maybe it's just because also change is resource intensive in a lot of cases. Like there is this element of like, hey, I can conserve my resources and keep on keeping on. A lot of analogies and phrases tonight. I can keep on keeping on, and I don't have to do too much. But, for me to make this thing better, man, I got to invest a lot in that. And I think we're resistant to that too, right? Again, humans, I think like we want to conserve energy. But I think, and not every single person I know is like this, but I think one way to combat against this is like you need to basically habituate yourself to change. And I do think this is where a lot of the things out there like do hard things, carry the boats and the logs, all that kind of stuff comes from. Challenge yourself, get outside your comfort zone. I think a lot of that advice comes from this concept of like, the more you can make yourself a little bit uncomfortable, the more habituated you become to change. And I think that's really cool and important. And I'm not saying you need to go do some like crazy difficult things, but the more you can challenge yourself with hard things, the more, we've talked about this before, you'll be confronted with failure. The more you'll realize failure is a very natural, human, inevitable part of life. And you'll learn how to navigate it better. And I think change just becomes a little bit easier. And again, I think it's a freaking, I was going to swear, but I changed. I think it's a really hard thing to do as an individual person. And then when you amplify that in a group and then having to manage, where is everyone else's ability, desire, capability to change at? Man, it becomes a lot more difficult. And also everybody likes the yes man. Nobody likes the no man or woman. You're taken in better if you kind of just agree, thumbs up, nod along. And, you point at something, you're like, well, hey, this is kind of out of whack. And someone's like, don't just be the town crier. Don't be just the annoying person who always says something's wrong. So if you're going to go down that road, not only do you have to point something out, but you have to point it out in a way where you already have constructive solutions and approaches to it. It's a challenge. It's a really interesting thing. I don't want to live with my head in the sand. I also don't want to live panicked about everything that could go wrong, In a lot of ways, especially for my cushy ass life, there's no other shoe that's going to drop. So, I'm trying to navigate that and figure that out, because sometimes it's really hard to change simple things. Another thing that got me thinking about this, I saw a meme the other night, and it was it was basically like a picture. A guy taped like 4 energy drinks together and then poured pre-workout on top of them and then drank it. And it was like, it's not about how much you can lift, it's about how much your heart can take. Never has a meme spoke to me so much. But yeah, getting off, caffeine, making that change. Even though I know all of the details and data behind it, tell me I should. It's just challenging. But anyway, there we go. Change. Had some other things I want to talk about. Didn't get to it. Don't want to go 11 minutes, so more tomorrow.